I'm Phoebe Lewis, the supplemental instructor for Dr. Byron Quinn's Natural Science Biology 1 course at Langston University. I've compiled a series of review videos that will help you with your final, and this one particular one focuses on Chapter 7. Now, if you guys remember, Chapter 7 focused on cellular respiration. So first we'll be talking about ATP and reviewing the fact that it is the energy molecule of the cell. We'll be discussing oxidation and reduction reactions and cellular respiration in its stages, glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. Now, just a reminder, ATP is the energy molecule of the body. You know that it works that it contains 3 phosphate groups, and when that third phosphate group breaks off, it releases energy in an exergonic reaction and then becomes ADP again, and then basically it's a never-ending cycle of coupled reactions. So just remember that ATP is the energy molecule of the body. It works when that third phosphate group breaks off and releases energy. The other thing that we discussed was oxidation and reduction reactions. Remember, oxidation, you can remember it by the acronym oil rig. Oxidation is loss of electrons, reduction is gain of electrons. So just some things to remind you that the electrons travel with the hydrogen. So wherever the hydrogen is, that is where the electrons are. And so, with that being said, the molecule with the hydrogen has gained the electrons and thus has been reduced. So let's go back. In the case of the electron carriers that we discussed in cellular respiration, NAD plus NADH, it goes back and forth from each of the forms. Oxidation and reduction always occur simultaneously, so when something is being oxidized, something else is being reduced. And so you can think of it, whenever that H is there, that means that it has the hydrogens and it has been reduced. So you can always tell which one has been reduced by which one has the H. So if you look over here, NAD plus to NADH, the NAD plus is oxidized, the NADH is reduced. NADH again is reduced, NADH plus is oxidized. So it's real easy. Just look wherever the H is, that is the one that has been reduced. Don't make this complicated. Wherever the H is, that has been reduced because the electrons travel with the H. It's like the H has a backpack of electrons on there. So wherever the H is, that is where that is the molecule that has been reduced. The other one then has been oxidized. Then we discuss, let's get into the meat of Chapter 7, which is cellular respiration. Remember, cellular respiration is how organisms harvest energy. It occurs in a 3-step process that occurs within the cell. The glycolysis, which occurs in the cytosol, is the first step. Krebs cycle that occurs in the inner compartment of the mitochondria is the second step. The electron transport chain that occurs in the inner membrane of the mitochondria is the third and final step. And so I've always suggest my students to make a chart to help them understand this. You know, I'm a big advocate of making study charts to help you remember these concepts. So make your own study chart for cellular respiration. I will write this down. You might want to go ahead and write that down. If you remember, make a 5-column chart. The first column saying stage. You know that there are 3 main stages: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain. But we also know that there's a transition step that occurs between glycolysis and Krebs cycle. Put the location that occurs in. Glycolysis we know occurs in cytosol. Transition step also occurs in the cytosol. The Krebs cycle occurs in the inner compartment of the mitochondria, where the electron transport chain occurs in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. The mitochondria isn't put right there, but just write that in. Inner membrane of the mitochondria. Well, what goes into glycolysis? Glucose goes into glycolysis. What comes out? 2 NADHs, 2 ATPs, pyruvic acid. Oxygen is not required for this step. In the transition step, the pyruvic acid goes into the transition step. What comes out? 2 NADHs, the acetyl coenzyme A, and some carbon dioxide. And again, oxygen is not required in this stage. Now, the Krebs cycle, which occurs in the mitochondria, as we mentioned before, what goes in? The acetyl coenzyme A, and what comes out? 6 NADHs, 2 FADH2s, which are both types of electron carriers, carbon dioxide, 2 ATP, and oxygen is required. What goes into the electron transport chain? All 10 of the NADHs that we've produced so far. 6 here, 2 here is 8, 2 more is 10. the 2 FADH2s that we got from the Krebs cycle, and oxygen to serve as that final electron acceptor. What comes out? 32 ATP and water. Is oxygen required? Yes. So what you notice, if you total everything up, you have 32 plus 2 is 34 plus 2. That's how you can see that you get 36 ATP from 1 molecule of glucose. So let's just go over this. I know that was a lot, but if you write this down in your chart, it will make it easier for you to follow along. So cellular respiration overview. Basically, it works like a machine. You put in one thing of glucose. After you leave glycolysis, you're getting those 2 ATP, and your glucose derivative is the pyruvic acid. Well, the pyruvic acid can't go straight into the mitochondria. It has to transfer itself into acetyl coenzyme A. So when it transfers itself into acetyl coenzyme A, it releases carbon dioxide, 2 more NADHs, and then that acetyl coenzyme A can go into the Krebs cycle. If you notice that this basically tells us the same thing our chart did. As the Krebs cycle turns, it releases carbon dioxide, 2 more ATP, 6 NADHs, and 2 FADH2s. And I've always described the electron transport chain as something like the battle. If you guys remember, your electron carriers are your soldiers, and so basically they're being prepared to go to battle here in the electron transport chain. You get all 10 of the NADHs and 2 of the FADH2s, and the oxygen that we breathe in to serve as that final electron acceptor to produce 32 ATP and water. Alright, now if you review your chapter on the cell and the functions of the organelles, you'll remember that the mitochondria we called were the powerhouses of the cell. Well, the reason why we consider the mitochondria the powerhouses of the cell is because 2 of the 3 steps of cellular respiration, which is how we get our energy, of course, occur in the mitochondria. So first, of course, the first step is glycolysis, and we know that that occurs in the cytosol, that liquid substance that that the organelles are suspended in, and that breaks up into pyruvic acid, which later breaks up into acetyl coenzyme A in the transition step. And if you refer to your chart, you can follow along with me. If at any time you need to pause the video to review the chart to make sure you understand what's going on, feel free to pause the video and review your chart that you wrote down earlier. So just to review, you remember the glycolysis. That's when the glucose comes in. It breaks up into 2 3-carbon pyruvic acids or pyruvates. And then that pyruvic acid goes through the transition step and changes into acetyl coenzyme A. Well, that acetyl coenzyme A can now enter the mitochondria. And it goes here to the inner compartment of the mitochondria, where it goes to the second main stage of cellular respiration called the Krebs cycle. So the acetyl coenzyme A goes into the Krebs cycle, and carbon dioxide is produced along with NADH and FADH2s. So that occurs here in the inner compartment of the mitochondria. And so this is just a review of what occurs. You don't need to know all of these steps, but the most important things to realize is that the acetyl coenzyme A, this 2-carbon molecule, binds with oxaloacetate, which is a 4-carbon molecule, and forms citric acid. The reason why this is important for you all to know is that sometimes the Krebs cycle is called the citric acid cycle, and the reason why is because, well, that first product that is formed is actually citric acid. And so as you can see here, as this Krebs cycle, it acts just like a cycle, like a wheel, kind of like a spinning wheel. And through each step, you have carbon dioxide being produced and electron carriers being made. And so through each of these intermediate products, you're getting a total of 6 NADHs, because you have 1 right here, 2 right here, 3 right here. Well, the Krebs cycle turns twice. And so since the Krebs cycle turns twice, you get 2, 4, 6 NADHs, and actually 2 FADH2s. And so that's where we're getting it from, right here. And like I said, refer back to your chart so you're able to follow along. So as you can see here, the products of the Krebs cycle, what goes in? Well, the reactants in the Krebs cycle is the acetyl coenzyme A. What goes out? 6 NADHs, 2 FADH2s, and 2 ATP. Well, let's move on to the main part, the most important part of cellular respiration. This is where we get most of our ATP from, and it's called the electron transport chain. It occurs, you remember we were right here in the inner compartment at the Krebs cycle. Well, then we're going to back up a little bit and go to this inner membrane. And so the inner membrane right here is filled with a whole bunch of different proteins that kind of act as pumps. And one of the most important ones to realize is this ATP synthase right here. Well, I always describe the electron transport chain as like a battle. So you prepare all these soldiers in the previous steps of cellular respiration. Your NADHs. You get 2 soldiers from glycolysis, 2 NADHs. You get 2 soldiers from the transition steps. So far we have 4 NADHs. Look on your chart. Follow me, follow along with me. And then 6 NADHs from the Krebs cycle. So now we have a total of 10 NADHs or electron carriers, or I consider them soldiers. And then 2 FADH2s that we got from the Krebs cycle. So we have a total of 10 NADHs, 2 FADH2s. Well, these electron carriers or electron soldiers, if you want to use my analogy, are going to the electron transport chain where the main battle occurs. And these electron carriers are pumped through these series of proteins, which creates a proton gradient and provides energy to phosphorylate ADP. Phosphorylate just means adding a phosphate group onto ADP to produce ATP. So the main things that you need to take away from the electron transport chain is just understand that this is where all the electron carriers go. They're being pumped through a series of proteins. The main one that we're going to focus on is ATP synthase, and it's going to create 32 ATP. So let's just do some ATP accounting right here. You remember, like I said, we got 2 NADHs from glycolysis. We got 2 ATPs. We got, in the transition step, we got 2 NADHs. Remember, we didn't get any ATP in that transition step. We did, however, get some carbon dioxide that isn't accounted for in this particular table. This is similar to the table that you all wrote down earlier, so you can still follow along. It's same concept. Krebs cycle, we got 6 NADHs, 2 FADH2s, 2 ATPs. So far, we have 4 ATP that we made. Electron transport chain, well, these total of the 10 NADHs that we have, 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 6 equals 10, and the 2 FADH2s that we got here from the Krebs cycle are able to produce 34 ATPs. So 34, 36, 38. Well, why do we have 36 down here? Well, the reason why we have 36 down here is because in glycolysis, we require 2 ATP to start. So those, although we made 38 ATP from a glucose molecule, 2 of them are required to start glycolysis. So it's just kind of like this is the amount of ATP we got after taxes. So this would be our net amount. Our gross would be 38 ATP. And that basically covers cellular respiration. Review your chart, and you guys got it.